there are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Star Wars Canon Library. My name is Brian. I'm the librarian here at the Star Wars Canon Library, where we're keeping all the canon in chronological order for you guys. And speaking of keeping it in chronological order, as far as the novels go and everything, I received a suggestion from a viewer for a video, and I figured that I would go ahead and do this video, you know, since I did one a while back like this, but it needs updated drastically just because of how much time has passed since I did that video. What they wanted to know was my list of novels from least favorite to favorite. This is just my personal opinion. This is me personally. Everybody may feel differently, but this is just personally my my opinion. There's 16 novels that are out. I'm not going to count the novelizations of the films because they're so much like the film, but because if I did, I'd have to put the episode 1 novel, the 2 novel, 3 novel in there, Catalyst, Rogue One, or, well, Catalyst is on the list, but Rogue One, and then, you know, all the classics, and 7, it's too many novels to list, because there's so much like the movie. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the list at my least favorite, and anybody who has been watching this channel for a certain amount of time knows what my least favorite canon novel is, and I gotta tell you, it is a piece of crap. It is Heir to the Jedi. I know some people out there really enjoyed this book, but the majority did not, and I'm in that majority. I hated this book with a passion that burns with the heat of 1,000 Alderons blowing up from the Death Star. I mean, I cannot stand this book. This was the 3rd canon novel that was released in the new canon slate. Back in 2000, and I want to say 15. I believe this book came out in 2015. And man, I just, like, most of the novels that if they're really good, I'll buzz through them in a couple days. This one took me 3 months to read, just because I started to read it and I put it down and I didn't want to pick it back up. And you know, and then I started the page and everything, and you know, the canon library, and Kirsty told me you were going to have to reread that book. And I went, no, I'm going to pick up where I left off, because you know, and she told me, if you wait too much longer, you're going to have to read the whole thing over again and start where you left off. I'm like, screw that, I'm picking up where I left off. I don't like this book at all. It's told from a first person point of view of Luke, like he's writing a diary, and it's just, it doesn't sound like Luke. What he does in the book isn't like Luke. He's just trying to get laid by this pilot, honestly, the entire time. And I cannot tell you how much I loathe this book. I don't even want it on my canon shelf. It's that bad, in my opinion. I cannot stand this book. I hate every second of it. And to be completely honest, you could read everything else in the canon timeline except this book, and you're not going to miss a thing. So that is my least favorite canon novel so far. I'm going to get off that before I start hurting somebody's feelings. So let's see here. The next one on the list up from that, it's 15 out of 16, is the novel Aftermath. The first Aftermath, not the second one, the first Aftermath, that was released in September of 2015. This book had so much hype behind it, and I was so excited because this was going to be our first look into post-Jedi Star Wars, and I was so excited for it, and I didn't expect what we got. I said in another video not too long ago that the book was all lead up. It was all build up, trying to get you to care about these characters that you have no clue who they are. Yes, Wedge is in the book, but I mean, everybody loves Wedge. But these characters, the main group of characters, they try to make you care about them, and it doesn't work. By the time you get to the end of the first book, you're just like, whew, all right, thank God I'm done reading that one. Okay. And I did not enjoy the first Aftermath book at all. I will get to the second one here before long, but I did not care for the first Aftermath. It was a hard read, and it's written in present tense. Like what is happening in the book is happening at that moment. It's not a past tense, right? So And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little jarring at first, but once you get into the beat of reading it that way, it's not that hard. But I didn't care for Aftermath that much, and that's why it's so low on the list. Now, coincidentally, these next four were all next to each other. It has nothing to do with the style or the format of the book. It just happened to be this way. The next one on my list is Before the Awakening. It's a little, almost a young adult novel that was released the same day as Aftermath, leading up to The Force Awakens. And no, I take that back. This one was not. This one was after Force Awakens. I'm thinking of the Luke, Han, and Leia books. I'm sorry. This one was released afterwards. But there's three separate stories in this book, one for Finn, one for Rey, and one for Poe Dameron from Force Awakens. And each one kind of shows how they lead up to where they are in The Force Awakens. Out of all three of them, my favorite one is the Rey story, her on Jakku. And it's just a nice little story, and it's really cool. It's definitely worth the read. The Poe Dameron story was kind of cool, and the Finn story was kind of cool, but the Rey story was my absolute favorite. But the only reason this book is so low on the list is because everything else has been so good, decently good, that this just happened to fall this far down on the list. So it's not that it's a bad read, it's just there's so much other stuff ahead of it that is so good. So next on my list, though, moving towards my favorite novel, is The Weapon of a Jedi. Now, this book was really good. This is another one of those young adult readers, novels that came out, short novel, that kind of made up for the Heir to the Jedi novel. This novel is what Heir to the Jedi should have been. This novel follows Luke Skywalker after the events of A New Hope, and I believe, yes, before the comic series picks up. And he's trying to find this Jedi temple and everything, and he takes R2 with him. He comes across this character named Sarko Plank, who I'm still trying to figure out who the hell Sarko Plank is. But anyway, this is a really good read. You can have it read in like 3 hours, and it's seriously superior to Heir to the Jedi, and it's a good makeup for it. And so it definitely pick this one up. It's definitely good. Let's see here. The next one is Moving Target. Now, what I like the most about Moving Target, and remember, these are going from my least favorite to my favorite. What I liked about Moving Target was this. When I was growing up, I had a handful of Star Wars EU novels, and one of them was Shadows of the Empire. Actually, Shadows of the Empire is the Star Wars book that got me reading all of the EU when I was younger, up to the point I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. But Shadows of the Empire was one of my favorite EU books, and I know a lot of people didn't like it. I loved it. But it took place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Showed a lot of what Leia was going through with Han being frozen in carbonite, and Luke training and building his new lightsaber and coming to terms with Vader, with the fact that Vader was his father. It was a great book. Now, this book takes place in the same time period as Shadows of the Empire. Now, remember, Shadows of the Empire is Legends. It is no longer canon. And now that this book is out, Shadows of the Empire will never be canon. This book officially null and voids Shadows of the Empire. But it's a Leia story, and what I liked the most about it was that it started to show, even before Rogue One came out, it started to show the gray moral area that the Rebel Alliance was willing to go to accomplish their missions. And this was the first time that I actually realized, reading these books, that there is no black and white anymore. There's this serious gray area where both sides operate in. And it was a very neat way to look at the Rebel Alliance and to see what Leia was going through with Han being frozen in carbonite, trying to plan a rescue mission while at the same time trying to protect the fleet so they can get ready for their assault on the second Death Star. And no, there are no Bothans in this book. This doesn't tell that story. Excuse me. But it is still an excellent little read. You guys definitely need to read this one, especially since Carrie Fisher is no longer with us. If you want a really strong Leia story, especially if you read and did not like the Princess Leia comic series that came out, the 5-issue run, which was crap. If you did not like that, read this. This will make up for it. I promise you that. So the Moving Target was next on my list moving forward. The next one, my favorite one out of all four of those novels that were released, was Smuggler's Run. Han Solo and Chewbacca story. And this was actually the novel that told us that Chewie did indeed get a medal after the Battle of Yavin. He did get a medal, and it even showed, like in the book, he's playing with it at the beginning. But It's a neat little story. Leia sends Han and Chewie on this mission to find this rebel informant, and it's a neat little story. One of the characters in it, one of the Imperials, pops up in Shattered Empire, the comic series. So, well, is mentioned in Shattered Empire. So it was a really good story, especially if you love Han Solo. This is an excellent story to read. Let's see here. And moving next was A New Dawn. Now, a lot of people did not like A New Dawn. And I can see why they didn't like it, but at the same time, I could appreciate it for what it was. Now, A New Dawn was the first of the new canon novels to be released. This was the one that kicked off the entire new canon slate. This is everything, and it introduced us to Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla from Rebels, and how they met, and that story and everything, and it's an all right book. It's not great by any means, but if you were just honestly, the only reason that anybody would want to read this book is to see how Kanan and Hera met. The book, the cover's a lie. Kanan never activates his lightsaber once in the book. It's just, and it takes place obviously before Rebels, but I'm thinking 1 or 2 years before Rebels. I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't definitively say, but it introduces us to this character called Count Vidian, who is almost a pseudo Vader. He's cybernetic, and he's this business expert who's trying to get this mining planet of Gorse back on track. And he's the main villain of the story, and he pops up in some short stories later on, and Rise of the Empire and stuff. But this was a neat little read. If you're OCD, read it. If not, and you just want to know how Kanan and Hera met, this is a good story to read. If you really don't care about that, you really don't need to pick this book up at all. But that was, I don't remember what number we're on now, but yeah, that was the next one in line. Now, Dark Disciple is next on my list, moving towards my favorite. Anybody who knows me knows that I do not like prequel era stuff. I'm not one of those people that anything prequel sucks. It's just, anytime I hear prequel era, I think of the prequels, and the prequels make my heart burn, and I don't like the prequels. I know there are people that do. I understand that, and you're entitled to like what you like. And if you enjoyed them, great, you enjoyed them. A lot of people got into Star Wars with the prequels, never knowing there were classics. And I don't fault you for that. Personally, my personal opinion, I did not enjoy the prequels at all. The last half of 3 was really good. Well, not really good, but it was tolerable. And I enjoyed that half of that prequel. So when I heard Dark Disciple was coming out and heard what it was about Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos from Clone Wars, I was like, oh crap, I don't want to read this. But I was completely wrong. This book is really good. And this book came out, I believe it was the 5th. I believe it was the 5th canon novel released. And it was released pretty close to Lost, well, it wasn't close to Lost Stars, but Lost Stars was supposed to be this love story, which it was, but if either of the 2 books is a love story, it's this one. Dark Disciple is, it's a good book, even for being prequel era stuff. It makes the prequels more tolerable, kind of like watching Clone Wars in chronological order makes it more tolerable. This book makes the prequels more tolerable in my book. We follow Asajj Ventress. She's no longer Count Dooku's apprentice, apparently. Obviously, she's a bounty hunter, and Quinlan Vos gets sent on this mission and decides he's going to work with her and use her as a tool. But this is a really good book, especially at the end when you see the fate of a certain character, and it's really a good book in the long run. And I don't like prequel stuff, so that should tell you something. Keep that in mind. Next on my list is one that at first I didn't think I was going to like at all. Battlefront Twilight Company. When I first picked up Battlefront, it was a very slow start. It was very hard to get into, and I thought it was just because of the story that was being told. The book does pick up. It follows Twilight Company literally from a soldier's point of view through the Star Wars galaxy. And it's a lot like Rogue One, which is funny because Alexander Freed also wrote the novelization of Rogue One. But the same thing with the Rogue One novelization. I know it's not on this list, but it had a slow start. Even though I've seen the movie, the novelization, I had a really hard time getting into the novelization of it. And I love Rogue One. That is my favorite Star Wars movie now. And it just, I had a hard time getting into it. And I think it's just this author's writing style. But Battlefront Twilight Company excuse me, has nothing to do with the video game at all. It's called Battlefront. It came out around the same time as the Battlefront game, but it has nothing to do with the game whatsoever. Obviously, the game has no story. It's just multiplayer. So, I mean, this book has nothing to do with the game. But it was a neat story to show the more gritty side of the Star Wars universe and the Galactic Civil War from a soldier's point of view. I was in the Army, so I can appreciate this novel a little bit more than some people can. Because I've been there sleeping on the hoods of Humvees and sleeping bags in the pouring rain, and and everything. And it's, I mean, this novel is not a bad read, especially if you like a war story, a gritty war story. This is a good one. If you can get through the first 5, 6, 7 chapters of the slow start and you get into the story, you're gonna love it. I promise you. So Battlefront is, I believe we're on number 8 on my list. So the next one, I said I'd get to it. Aftermath Life Debt. This is the second Aftermath book. We're still waiting for the third one to come out next month. Excuse me. But Aftermath Life Debt is the direct sequel to Aftermath. And when I said I did not enjoy the first Aftermath, this one made up for it. I was not excited about reading this book until I picked it up and was like 4 or 5 chapters into it. And it's like, this is awesome. That's when I realized the first book was all lead up and then payoff is coming in the third book. And this one takes the same group of characters and it inserts Han and Chewie into the story. And that's the Life Debt subtitle. That's where it comes from. And you hear a little bit about how Han and Chewie met, which we will, I'm assuming we will see more of in the Han Solo movie next year. But this book was superior in every way to the first Aftermath. And the first one was hard to get through, and this one is written the same way in the present tense style. But this one saved this trilogy of books for me. Empire's End is coming out next month. I am so looking forward to that one because this book leads right up to the Battle of Jakku, and I am so excited to actually see the Battle of Jakku. So, Aftermath Life Debt is definitely higher on my list, and it's definitely an enjoyable read. So, next is one that came out not too long ago, Ahsoka. Now, like everybody else, when Clone Wars first started, I went to the theater to see the theatrical release of the weird, like, 2 or 3 episode thing they put together, where Jabba the Hutt's son got captured. That was when they introduced Ahsoka Tano to us, Anakin Skywalker's Jedi apprentice. I hated Ahsoka from that moment on. I could not stand her. Every time I watch Clone Wars, I'm just like, oh, God. But then when Clone Wars went from, I believe it was Cartoon Network to the CW, they did an animation change, and I don't know if the writing changed at all, or if it was like a psychological thing, but it seemed like a different show, and Ahsoka began to grow on me. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, yeah, she's a cool character, whatever, I can accept it. And then Rebels came along and reintroduced us to Ahsoka after she left the Jedi Order, and it cemented her in my mind as a badass. Matter of fact, one of our cats' names is Ahsoka right now. We named one of our cats Ahsoka, and I love the character of Ahsoka Tano. I have a Black Series figure of her on my shelf, which I never thought I would be able to say. But I love the character Ahsoka. So when this novel was coming out, I was extremely excited because I knew this picked up like a year after Revenge of the Sith, and it was her dealing with, the loss of the Jedi, them being extinct or endangered, I should say now. Her reaching out in the novel to try to find Anakin and Obi-Wan and not feeling anything. I mean, it was a neat story. It really is. That was my favorite parts of the story too. What she was doing in the book, I didn't give a crap, but what she was going through, if that makes sense, is what I enjoyed the most. And there's twin lightsabers. It shows where she gets the kyber crystals for those with the white blades. She shows her building the sabers to a working condition, not polished by any means, but to a working condition. And it shows a side of Ahsoka of her trying to not use the Force. Obviously, kind of like along the lines of what Obi-Wan has done in the Star Wars comic when you see the trilogy of him trying to deal with not being a Jedi anymore on Tatooine. It's along the same lines, and it's very an interesting read. I loved this book. I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down. I loved it. And if you guys, even if you hate the character Ahsoka Tano, well, if you hate the character Ahsoka, you probably won't like this book. But even if you kind of like her, read this book because it will cement her in as a badass in your head and lead you right into where Rebels comes from, or where she comes where she comes in Rebels. So, guys, make sure to check that one out. This one's a good one. So, next on my list, I believe this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 5 on my list, moving up. And this one is one that I can't believe I'm saying is this high on the list. It is Star Wars Catalyst, a Rogue One novel. This is the prequel novel to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Now, the way I said it in my Rogue One review was this. This book, we know Rogue One did not have an opening crawl. This book is the opening crawl for Rogue One. We meet Galen Erso and we meet his wife Lyra. Jyn is born in this book. And we see how Krennic and Erso meet. We see what happened there. Like in the beginning of Rogue One, when Krennic walks up to him and says, "We were this close to greatness," you see what happens in this book. This book is phenomenal. It just is, and it's written by the same man who did Tarkin, which was is also on this list. It's a little higher up, but this book is great, especially if you want to know what led up to Rogue One. This is the one to read. This is the one and only canon novel Kirsty has read so far, and she actually audiobooked it. And I told her she needed to. She was going to go watch Rogue One with me, and it's a very good book. I mean, excellent book. I'm sorry, I can't even talk. It is a direct extension of Rogue One. You can read this, and then I'll get to the next one you can read in a minute, and then Rogue One, and it all leads in perfectly. So, yeah, Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, excellent read, and definitely if you loved Rogue One as much as I did, even if you didn't love it as much as I did, you need to read this book. This is the opening crawl for Rogue One. That's the best way I can describe it. So, Catalyst is number 5 on my list. Number 4, I mentioned Tarkin. Tarkin is my 4th favorite Star Wars novel so far. It was the 2nd novel released out of all the canon released, and like I said, Catalyst leaves off right where Tarkin picks up. You can literally read Catalyst, read Tarkin, and watch Rogue One, and that's kind of a trilogy. Especially if you're doing novels and you read the Rogue One novel and you read Catalyst, Tarkin, Rogue One, and it kind of boom, 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 and it's really neat the way they go together. But Tarkin, as its own novel, introduces us to another side of Tarkin that we did not know was there. His upbringing, what made him so brutal, what made him so cold, how and why Vader lets him get away with ordering him around. That shared mutual respect is there, and it shows how that comes to be. And this is, I mean, it's dark. I mean, some of the things that happened to Tarkin when he's a kid, and the way his parents, brought him up and stuff, and the planet he lived on, and his culture, and traditions. I mean, it was insane to see. So, I mean, Tarkin is absolutely a great novel. I wanted this book when I was done reading it. I wanted this book to go on another 50, 60, 70, 80 pages. I did not want it to stop, but sadly it did. So, I mean, no book goes on forever. But this is an excellent read, guys. It's my 4th favorite canon novel. My number 3 is Lords of the Sith. This was the 4th canon novel released after the slate wipe. And this one follows Vader and the Emperor. Well, it follows Vader and the Emperor a lot, but it actually centers around Cham Syndulla, Hera's father. He was in Clone Wars as well as Rebels, but he's in this book. He's the main protagonist in this book. And he's trying to lead the Free Ryloth movement still trying to free Ryloth from the Empire. And Vader and the Emperor show up, and they attempt to assassinate him, and assassinate them both. Now, this book was our first glimpse at brutal Vader. This book was the reason I was looking forward to Rogue One so much. The two have nothing to do with each other, but this book showed a side of Vader that's the Vader I was afraid of when I was a kid. I mean, beheading people and just murdering fools left and right. And the dynamic between the Emperor and Vader in this book is so well written that it is almost insane. One of my favorite parts in the book is between the Emperor and Vader. And, not to give too much away, but there's one point where Vader and the Emperor are fighting these creatures. I believe they were insects of some kind. Giant insects, and the Emperor gets overtaken, and Vader steps back from it and is going to let Palpatine die, but Palpatine comes out of it and Vader helps him, And then Palpatine asks him, "Did you think about letting me die?" And Vader pauses and says, "Yes." And the Emperor's like, "Good." I love it. I mean, this book is so good. It shows Vader at the peak of his power, even before Rebels. And it's just insane, insanely good book. This is an amazing book for any Star Wars fan to read. Not necessarily essential reading for the story, but essential reading if you want an appreciation for Vader, to see what kind of character he really was outside of the films. So this is an excellent book to read, and it's number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list is Bloodline, written by Claudia Gray. This was her second novel written, and this takes place 5-6 years before The Force Awakens, and it's mainly a Leia book. It's a political thriller, and I mean, there's quite a bit in this book that kind of hint towards Episode 7 to kind of show, oh, this is how we got there. And from what I've heard, there's some things in there that hint at Episode 8 as well. Rian Johnson, the director of Episode 8, had a hand in writing this book as well for certain scenes. Excellent book, though. I mean, excellent. This is the book. Luke and Ben Solo are not physically in this book, but they're mentioned quite a bit before Ben turns to the dark side and becomes Kylo Ren. But there's no mention of how he turned or why he turned. I have my theories as to why he turned, but there's no mention to concrete it in. There's no mention of Rey like I thought there would be. The Jedi Order is still flourishing at this. The new Jedi Order is still flourishing at this point. So she's not mentioned anywhere in it at all. So I don't. And that's the other thing. I don't believe Rey had anything to do with the Jedi Order being taken out the second time, because she was a kid when she got left on Jakku, and this novel shows that the Jedi Order was taken out no further back than 5 years before Force Awakens. So it couldn't have been that. But anyway, back to Bloodline. Like I said, this is a political thriller, a lot of political espionage in this book. We definitely see that badass side of Leia again, and it's, I mean, if you didn't like the Leia comic, this book is for you. This book is literally Leia, and it shows the dynamic of her and Han Solo, you know, and they're still together at this point, obviously, because Ben is still a Jedi. But this is definitely this is my second favorite canon novel released. I mean, this book is phenomenal. And it's just absolutely amazing. So on to my number 1. If you guys have been keeping track of what novels have come out so far, or if you know me at all, you know what my number 1 favorite novel is. And it is the novel Lost Stars. This book came out at the exact same time as Aftermath. And Aftermath got all of the hype, and it didn't deserve it. This book deserved it. This one is published by Lucasfilm Press. It is not a Del Rey book. But this is the book that brought Claudia Gray from Lucasfilm Press into Del Rey to write Bloodline. The book is that good. Lost Stars picks up several years before A New Hope and follows these two characters who are in love with each other. And they both join the Empire. And one of them is, I'm not going to say which one, one of them is disenfranchised with the Empire and leaves and joins the Rebellion. They're still star-crossed lovers, but one's on the Empire side, one's on the Rebel Alliance side. And the book literally weaves itself in and out of the classic trilogy all the way up until up through and after the Battle of Jakku. When you read this book, you realize that these characters had pivotal influence in the Star Wars trilogy. I mean, they were there for almost everything, and you didn't even realize it, because like the female in the story was in the room, in the exact same room when 3PO and R2 launched the escape pod from the Tantive in the beginning of A New Hope, and the Imperial's like, hold your fire, there's no life forms, they must have short-circuited. She was sitting right there. It's just, and they were, you know, she was on the Death Star when it blew up Alderaan, and he was an Imperial scout at that point, and he was surveying Dantooine after Leia told Tarkin that the Rebel base is on Dantooine. Like, I mean, when you come up on Bespin, when you come into Empire Strikes Back, well, the one that stays on the Empire side has a pivotal. They're the one that deactivates the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon on Bespin. One of the characters, the Imperial character, is the one trying to lead the TIE fighters through the asteroid field after the Millennium Falcon in Empire Strikes Back when they're flying away. I mean, Oh my God, like this book is so cool how it weaves itself and is naturally part of the trilogy, and I love it. And this is my absolute favorite canon novel release so far, and so far nothing has come close. Well, Bloodline has come close to topping it, but Lost Stars, man, it's my favorite novel. I cannot stress how good this novel is. I read it in 2 days, and it's the longest canon novel there is. I tried going to bed, and I laid there for 10 minutes, couldn't sleep, picked my book back up and keep reading. And I stayed up all night reading that book, went to work dog-ass tired the next day, but I had my book finished. And I love this book so much, I went and bought Andrew a copy of it because every Star Wars fan needs a copy of this book. It is so good. This book is essential reading, especially if you want to see what was going on behind the scenes, just out of the camera shot of the films. I mean, it's so cool. So, guys, those were my lists. That was my list of my least favorite to my favorite novels. That's just me personally. Your opinions may differ slightly. Your opinions may differ greatly. Your favorite novel may be Heir to the Jedi. Your least favorite novel may be Lost Stars. I'm not going to begrudge you that. Everybody has entitled to their own opinion, and everybody likes different things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But guys, make sure to comment below and let us know what's your order of your least favorite to favorite novels. What are your favorite novels? Why? Guys, just start the conversation. I love reading your guys' comments. I try to answer each and every one of them the best I can. It's not always easy, but I always try to. Guys, if you like this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. There's plenty more material coming from where this came from. And if you guys want to, I've lost my mindset. If you guys want to check us out on Facebook, it is facebook.com/Star Wars Canon Library. You can email us any questions. I'm doing a live Q&A later tonight. You can email us any questions at starwarscanonlibrary@gmail.com. And you can also visit our website. We do have an official website. It is www.starwarscanonlibrary.com. So make sure to check that out. Everything you need. The timeline is there. The Clone Wars chronological list is there. Cover art of every comic book, every novel, every movie, every TV show. Everything is at that website. That is the one-stop place. So guys, make sure to check out starwarscanonlibrary.com. We'd sure appreciate it. And guys, until next time, this is Brian signing off, and may the Force be with you.